Hi, welcome to Accelerated Engineering. This is the Beginner's Guide to Excel Part 3, which is the Introduction to Functions. If you were looking for a tutorial on a specific function or on a different part of Excel, please let me know in the comments so that I can get started making on that. So this is the introduction to all of Excel's functions. We're going to look at what a function is, what it does, how to work with them, and then some slightly more advanced techniques at working with them. Nothing too complicated and nothing overwhelming for today. We're going to start off with what is a function? And the answer to that is that a function is a tool or an instruction set for your computer to do some work. It's a tool that makes a computer do work that you don't want to do all the time by yourself or by hand, for example. So for example, if I have a few numbers here and I need to add them, well, I don't want to do that all the time by myself. I'd rather if my computer added them up for me. I just need an instruction that tells my computer how to add these numbers up. And Excel makes that really easy. I can use just one function, the sum function, and add up all of my values one by one. And Excel does the math for me. That's great. That is a fantastic bit of computer work that I never have to think about again. I never have to do math again. Wahoo! Just kidding. I love math. It's a problem. Everybody's got their addictions. Mine's math. Maybe Excel. Anyway, a function has 4 basic parts that it needs in order to work or in order to be useful. And the first part is the name. The name of the function that I've used here is sum. This is the part that is like human identifiable so that I know what this function is doing. There are other functions in Excel with different names. For example, actually let's use this one. Go to the Formulas tab and look at all the categories of functions that are available. I'll look at math because that's where I'm familiar. Go, what do all of these do? Well, take for example, here's one, arctangent. It returns the arctangent of a number. That's a trigonometric function that I don't like doing by hand. Let's do something a little bit easier. Even. Oh, well, even takes any number that I throw at it and then rounds it up if it's positive to the nearest even number or down to the nearest even number. Let's actually save that one for later. What else have we got? Where's my product? Here we go. Product multiplies numbers together. That could be useful. Round does all of my rounding for me, rounds it off to however many digits I want. The idea of the name of a function is that it gives you an idea of what it does. It's the human readable part. That's the first part of a function. The next part of a function is its inputs or its arguments. The sum function uses a number of arguments that I've given it here. They are all references to these other values. Different functions have different numbers or different types of arguments. For example, the pi function accepts no arguments. You have to give it nothing. Its only job is to output the mathematical constant for pi. Other functions, here, I'm actually going to do this, and I'm going to put a marker, an apostrophe in front so that you can see what that one is. This is the function, this is what it does. The next one that we might be interested in is the square root function, for example. The square root function its only job is to take a number and return the square root of it. So it gets one input. And I'm actually going to give it the number 16 and tell it to give me a square root of 16, which should be 4. Sure enough, it is. Tuck that one to the side. So that's an example of a argument or a function with one argument. The sum function that we've already seen here can accept many arguments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it accepts close to 256 arguments, but don't quote me on that. It accepts a lot. Now, sum is actually a even smarter function than that. We can change the way that this input goes. Instead of inputting all of these cell references, and remember a cell reference just tells it to go find the value over there, I can give it a range instead. I'll just click and drag across this entire range. This is everything from C4 to G4, and it adds them all up and gives me the same answer. Now, there are a few different types of inputs that, that functions will accept. For example, sum accepts only numbers. Square root function only accepts numbers. But there are other functions like trim. Let's say I've got a name, John Smith, and add a bunch of spaces after it and hit enter. I have a function called the trim function, which will take that text and take all the spaces off of the end of it. And you can't see it. Let's see if I add spaces to the front. There we go. It takes all the spaces off the front and off the back and just returns the remainder of the text. I could also use, what else uses text? Where's my upper? There we go. The text, this upper, oh, sorry, I don't want to use the wizard, never mind. If I said to the upper and convert this all to uppercase, I can grab that value and convert it all to uppercase. And this is a function that accepts text input. Most things in Excel are either text or numbers. There's also a value called a Boolean, which means that it is either true or false, and there are some errors as other types, but mostly we deal with numbers and text. Okay, parts so far. Names, inputs. The third part is the operations, the actual mathematical steps or the procedural steps. For example, in the upper function that we used, it took all the values and converted them to uppercase letters. Those are the operations. It's the actual procedural instructions or steps. And then there's the output. The output is the value that the function returns to us, and that's usually what we're interested in getting. Taking some inputs, converting them through a little machine, and spitting out some sort of useful output. Okay. Now we've already touched on a little bit on how to feed inputs to a function. There are several ways to do this. The hardest way, we're just going to use the sum function again. The hardest way to input values to a function is to actually type in the numbers yourself and have them all entered that way. Sure, you can do it, but it just takes too long. The next way that we can feed inputs to a function, which we've already seen, is by cell reference. By clicking each cell individually, separated by commas, and feeding it as many numbers as it'll take. Throw that one in there just for good measure. And it will take that and perform a process on all of that. Okay. We can also take one of these values, or some number of these values, and replace it with a range reference. See how that's separated by a colon? It says take everything between C4 and G4. And I can mix and match these a little bit. I can take C4 to G4 and also the value in K3, and I still get 198. Mix and match some more. I'll throw the number 2 in there just so that we get a nice even 200. Now we can also add, as a reference, other functions. So for example, we've got this square root of 16. We already know what value that is. I can take the square root of 16 function, Control C, copy, and insert that function as an argument to the sum function like this, making sure that I have enough parentheses in all the right places. The square root function has its opening and closing parentheses, and the sum function has its open and closing parentheses. When I hit enter, that comes up as 204, which is exactly what we would expect by adding the square root of 16, 4 to 200. There we go. So those are all the ways that we can do inputs. You can put functions inside of functions, and that becomes very useful very quickly. That's basically functions and how to use them and how to feed new values into them. As a slightly more, and if I didn't say already, changing any of the numbers in these ranges will cause that function to automatically update. This is where Excel becomes very powerful. Because instead of having to go back and rebuild this formula, or rebuild this function, pardon me, every time, because I've used named or range references or cell references, Excel already knows that when this value changes, it updates the output of this function. Now, where this becomes very, very useful, what that is say, for example, I wanted to know the sum of all of these values. Okay, and you can see how it's actually changed the reference type again to show that it's an entire column, the entire sales column of table 1. It's not the example I wanted to show, so I'm going to come back to it. I want to add up all of these values. We've seen a range reference before. We know what this does. It spits out the value. Anytime I go and change this value or any value in here, my sum automatically updates. Now it actually gets even better than that, because I don't even have to be on the same sheet in order for this to work. I can be somewhere completely different. Let's say, for example, I want to have something that says this is the sum of all values for January, and I'll put it in this cell. I can say this is going to be equal to sum, and open the parentheses, and then click over to the sheet that I actually have data on that I want to add, and start highlighting stuff over here. You can see in the formula bar, it's already noticed, hey, you've gone to another sheet, and it uses a special syntax to show that you've gone to another sheet. And then I can grab a cell or a range reference from over here and close my parentheses, and I will get the sum of all those values on the sheet that I want it. This is still referenced to sheet 3, but I get the sum on another sheet where I want it. This is useful for taking data and tucking it away somewhere where people aren't going to see it and just showing the results of that data, or the results of that calculation, pardon me. So that's super handy. Now, another way that tables get to be useful inside of this is, and I already kind of got started on it, is if you select an entire column of a table, Excel updates the reference in this other syntax. It shows table 1, a square bracket, sales, the title of the column, and then another bracket. And I can add up all of the values in that column, but now when I go and add more values to the bottom of that table, it automatically updates because the table knows that it's having data added to it. This reference continues to collect information from all of this table, or from all of this, all of the values inside of this column. Super handy to have a formula that grows with you, or that grows with your table or with your data. It's very handy. Excel tries to be as smart as possible with those things. And in the interest of keeping things dynamic, what happens if I change the name of this column? Let's say this isn't actually sales. This is, I don't know, steps, trips to the gym. Let's go with steps. This is how many steps we took in that month, which is a sad amount. The reference in this cell automatically updated to show that it's still taking information from the same column, but the name of that column has changed. Similarly, if we change the name of this sheet to go to be like, I don't know, steps per month, and return to our previous function, Excel has updated that reference to say, oh, this needs to be from the sheet steps per month, same range as before. And if we backspace that and then go and change this reference, it's got a little bit, nope, there we go. It smartened up and figured it out. We have a reference to another sheet, we have it referenced to this table, we have a column reference, or a column title reference, hit enter, and that will always update with the sum of all of the values in that table. This is where things, references can get very, very clever very quickly. Anyway, that's basically how functions work. To explore all of the functions that Excel has will take days and days and days and days of your time. But if you have something that you want Excel to do, there is probably a function that does that. It's worth looking up at an online forum for a function that does the thing that you want to do if you can't find it yourself. We also have the ability to, insert a function, and Excel will take a guess at things that you want to do, like take an average of values, go, nope, how do I average, go, average, go. Okay, this isn't the great tool. And it comes up with some formulas or functions that might be related. So that's kind of handy. Or, of course, you could always subscribe and comment which functions that you want to see next. And this concludes the guide on Introduction to Functions. Starting in the next guide unit, I'll look at some of the most common functions, about the 10 most common functions that are useful inside of Excel, that are especially useful or easy to understand. They're good for beginners. I'll look forward to having that video done hopefully in the next couple of days. Anyway, thanks for watching Accelerated Engineering. Hope you have a great day.